Save. Okay, I think we're good.
Cool. So the first question was, what is troubling about Mr. Frank's reflections on adding points to test scores and which ethical developments apply? When I went through that, like the first thing he said in his statement, he talked about how it was like a pretty mild difference in scores, and he kind of just seemed like he was brushing it off. Like he came back around at the end of his statement and said like the importance of honesty and all that kind of stuff. But when I first read it, it kind of made me think he doesn't necessarily care as much. And then as far as like development goes, it kind of sits like compartmentalizer because it's like it works for him and he's getting a benefit out of it, but everything else like doesn't matter. That's what I kind of thought.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I said like, what to add to like what Ryan said was like he said like there's a huge like towards like the end where like he like started to realize like it was like bad. He's like, yeah, 10. There's like a big difference between 10 and 12, like 20 points difference. It could be like an important distinction. And I also had compartmentalize as like my ethical development as well. Kind of just like he gets the benefit, but everything that's around him surrounds him is not getting that benefit at all.
Hmm.
So
That's what drives him.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I put the same thing. Um, and off of what you said, like in that same statement, he said I feel so many schools have very clear obligation to college-bound students to report this information honestly. And like obviously it's a really big deal. And like you said, 10 to 20 points can make a huge difference in like their decision with a student. So yeah, I agree with both of you guys on that.
I was just a little confused about that because when he said that is a pretty mild difference in a point score, that said 10 points, 20 points to a student that isn't getting that score on the SAT could be an important distinction. Like, did you guys think he was mentioning like distinction for the college or distinction for the student?
Probably just like the distinction for the student's ability. That's what I kind of got from
Yeah.
it. Like,
I
you
feel
know,
like he might mean for the college because I know a lot of colleges have like a uh, base of like an
baseline.
SAT score. So like if you're under, like for me when I played football, every college was telling me like a certain SAT score that they wanted me to reach for me to get into the school. So like if you boost those up by 10 to 20 points, a lot of kids could be getting into schools that they shouldn't have gotten into and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I surprised just plays both ways. Like he probably meant both.
that's how
Yeah.
I perceived it as well. Oops, we forgot someone. Hold on. Hi, Matthew. Sorry, we started recording. I thought that
Sorry.
as well for like the college standpoint, like, um, oh my gosh, where was I going with this?
The
Like, if
distinction.
10 to 20 points to a student is the difference between Princeton and Harvard or like that type of school, but then I also thought of it as like, is 10 to 20 points really like, what is that? Like, two questions getting wrong?
Mm.
Yeah.
That really gonna like for a college be like, no, you got a 1400. I can't let you in because we have a minimum of 1410. Like, is that
Yes.
distinction that important? Not that it's not important, but is it like
Yeah, I
that
know what you mean.
big of a
It's goofy.
difference?
Goofy
Hmm.
system.
That's just how I kind of went through it in my head.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We just did number one, Matt, if you want to talk about that before we go to number two. If you have anything you wanted to say. Talked about
Yeah,
compartmentalizing.
nah,
Yeah,
I'm actually opening it up right now. My computer was dead, so it just like came back to life. So
gotcha.
if I can, I'm just gonna hop on for number two. I'm still like pulling it up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cheers.
I
Cheers.
also
So a
agree
question.
with,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
what Cameron said on the whole, like, schools have a very clear obligation to college-bound students to report this information honestly. Because if they are saying our bare minimum is, or like our average is like 1410 when it was actually 1400, and a student's like, okay, I can't do it. I'm not close enough. Like that type of thing, I agree. Like
Mhm.
Hmm.
having that information is a big deal.
Yeah.
So question number 2, why do you think the Dean of Admissions added on the points? What ethical dilemma applies? Why? When I first kind of read that, I was definitely wondering what this guy's motivation was because he's obviously like lying purposely. And there was one part that it mentioned that the critical reading scores were the lowest in 2000. That critical reading scores in 2011 were the lowest that they've been since 2007. So I'm assuming he just wanted to just kind of hide the fact that things weren't kind of going their way. And as far as dilemma goes, that's just manipulation, right? He clearly
Yeah.
adjusted the scores.
Yeah. Once again, I agree with you, Ryan. I had taken an unfair advantage for that question. Like he was, was hiding all of like that information for like those, scores and everything. Um, I also like wanted to add like, um, the reason like maybe he added was like maybe for competition. Like these colleges are competing to get like the best students, and
Mm,
in order to get those best students, they want like the highest SAT scores. So it could be like a sort of edge of like competition as well
a
between
little
like other
ploy.
colleges. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I agree with Ethan. I feel like he could have done it with good intentions and bad intentions. Well, I mean, not even good intent. He probably did have good intentions with doing it, but like it could go for the good or the bad because, of course, their students could get into better colleges with knowing that their SATs are higher, but at the same time, students that are younger and looking for his school are going to see that the average score is higher than it is, and they might be not be getting the education that they think that they're getting when they come in there.
Mm, certainly.
Yeah.
I agree with Cleo. That's actually that's a really good point I didn't think about. It kind of like inflates the perspective of how their like scores look. So kind of gives younger people like a not true image. Yeah,
More
no, I definitely think
misleads
it
them.
could have been positive and negative. It works for like the younger kids, definitely like bringing more people into the school.
Yeah. And like off of that, like I also said for an ethical dilemma, I said fraud because he's giving and allowing false impressions of the scores. Um, because like you said, like if a student comes in and they have these expectations that they can't meet because it's like a false impression of what they actually do, then it's kind of unfair to the other students as well who are trying to get in or are trying to compete with that.
I also added hiding or divulging information to the future college students. Because if they're like, oh yeah, I got a 1460 on my SAT, would you get? Oh, I got a 13.9, like that type of thing where it's like, okay, but I thought this was what we were supposed to have to get into the school. How did you get in? Like that type of
Right.
thing.
Mm.
hmm
I think it's interesting how like all these like this situation particularly, but a lot of the situations that we've gone through in class, like the dilemmas and the developments, like there's so much like kind of carryover and whatever like your perspective is, like it works. Like you can make sense of it through any of them. Like we obviously, what was that, 5 different dilemmas that we just talked about? They
Yep.
all work.
And there's like more that can be happening for like what ethical issue was this? I said procrastinator, but I like couldn't think of one that was necessarily wrong, like that type of thing where
Mm,
they all fit based on like how you change your perspective on it.
good stuff. Good stuff.
That's a good point. Good point.
Does anybody have anything else to say before we move on to number 3?
I don't think so. I think we
everything.
covered it pretty well.
All right, cool. So number 3, explain how the role of rankings would influence behavior among employees at colleges and universities. First thing that kind of comes to my head is just like whenever you start doing rankings, that means like what, competition, and lines can get lost in competition, and like there's so much that comes down to like your own individual morality and stuff like that that you can't really like account for or like control. So it's kind of different for everybody, but I could see how like a ranking system would motivate somebody to bend the lines to get themselves higher up.
Yeah.
One thing that like I also want to add is Like you think about it. You think Ivy League, you think money, it's expensive to be there. It's you're paying for this super high education, the best type of thing versus like the professors are being paid well. They're probably all making six figures. All the employees probably are as well. Like they pay to have their name. They have a lot of alumni who give them a lot of money to like continue the program. And I'm not trying to shit on SUNY schools, but like when you hear like community college or SUNY school, you just think like, okay, how come this school isn't well
Stereotype.
known? I had a professor on the first day literally be like, I'm an adjunct professor. I don't make any money. He was like, I make the same amount as a crossing guard here at Cortland, but
Damn.
I'm still going to teach you everything I know. So it's like, how does, like, he's still motivated to teach us because his intentions and his ethics are more in line than, say, these employees at these Ivy League schools who are making the big bucks and who are like these privileged professors where they have the best of the best coming. And it's kind of like the ego on their shoulders, like that type of thing, where my professor was like, listen, the person who sits inside that booth at the ASC parking lot, I make the same amount of money as them. Do I want to be here? No. But am I going to still teach you the best I can? Absolutely. So I just think like everyone's ethics are different.
Mhm.
I
That's a
agree
good
with
point.
that. Sorry, it's all about perspective. Uh, Going back to what Ryan said, I've actually kind of like noticed that about this class, all the ethical dilemmas and situations we've looked at. It all has to do with like perspective and how like I guess you take it in like for yourself. Like how you're saying about like your professor that gets paid the same as a ASC like booth person. I'm sure he has more like fun and probably enjoys teaching more than those Ivy League professors. Because I feel like when you get that attitude, it's you kind of like stay with that and you get kind of snobby.
Certainly.
To add to like what Sid said about like all like these Ivy League schools, there's like this cheesy like saying that came to my mind when I read this question, like great power comes with great responsibility. Like these like as the vice president and like the dean of admissions, you should like understand like at the like where you are like at this college, like an Ivy League like college, high academic and everything. Like you're very like you have to take like accountability and like responsibility and like in your college basically like it, it plays like a big role in like the students admissions and like you want like the best like students and not like the best students with the best AT scores that are not actually like accurate. It's it's like back to like what I was saying, like great power, great responsibility. Like these powerful people in the ranking system should be aware of how much they control and how much, and in order for them to like understand how much they can control, they should also know like how much they should take accountable as well.
Certainly.
Sorry, but who is it to like say, like, we're all getting a degree, like that type of thing. And this professor who I'm talking about actually worked at Cornell, and he has an offer to work for a college in Berlin, I think. So he's like a really good professor, but some people might think to invalidate him because he is at like a state school instead of that Ivy League. Like, rankings don't really play a role in the validity of who you are as a person. So it's just like all about that person's ethics, where it's like I could think one thing, but Ryan might think the complete opposite because as his ethics and morals are different than mine. So it's just like, why are there rankings? Like, who created this system to say that Ivy League is the best when someone graduating from Cortland can do equally as well as someone who went to an Ivy League? So I definitely think that the role of rankings play a huge um, decision on like how employees act at these different universities and colleges.
Right. And like what Matt said, the role of rankings, like it is what it is, but I think a lot of it just more so falls back on your perspective of that ranking. Like if you perceive the ranking as something that's gonna like keep you honest and keep you accountable and understand where you're at, then so be it. But if you perceive this ranking as like this is gonna determine this, that, and the other thing, and like I don't care like what happens, but I have to get here so I can get that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with
So,
that, especially with professors. Like you were saying, like if a professor, like a professor really loves their job when they're not making that much, but they're still doing it because they love to teach. And like people at the Ivy levels, like you were saying, they make like insane amount of money and their egos just go through the roof. They know they're getting the best of the best. So they're probably just not as, they're probably meaner, stricter, like way harsher on their students because their expectations are so high and they're like, I'm the best, I'm the smartest, I make this much, and it kind of changes the perspective on like the classroom environment. Even just the classroom environment is totally different. And
Dilutes everything.
And something we all might be able to relate to, like, have you ever had something marked wrong on an exam and then approached your professor about it and been like, hey, you said this was the correct answer. I have that put down, but I got a point taken off, and they're like defensive about it, like that type of thing where they're like, no, you're wrong.
So,
Oh, I don't know how that mistake happened. Like I would never, like that would never happen. Like that type of thing where a professor, another one could be like, oh, absolutely, like I'll give you the point back.
yeah,
Like that's how I see it, is where like you experience a professor who thinks they're way above you, but then you experience a professor who's like, absolutely, come sit down and have coffee with me during my office hours. I want to meet you, I want to talk to you. So like that's how I it happens in Cortland too. Like we all
hmm
doctors, there's just professors, like that type of thing. There's ranking systems throughout different levels of hierarchy.
for sure.
yeah, I
Does
agree.
anything have anything else they want to say before we move on to question 4?
I feel like that's the ranking. It's more like education, not like social. So like, like when you go talk to that professor that's like you did something wrong and they really treat you like say like you messed up this little thing and they really act like you did something that could shift the world. I feel like
Mm,
that more falls on like the person than because like, you know, no matter what you rank, how great of a professor you are, that's still like that comes down to how you personally like view the world and whether you're gonna make it such a big deal.
Mhm.
for sure, man.
That's it.
All right. So last question, question number 4. Discuss whether the dean of admissions behavior aligned with the university's mission. So when I was reading through the university's mission, like it's similar to a lot of schools, it talks about like fostering the best like educational environment for people to grow and stuff like that, which they still could have been upholding, but there was 2 parts of it that kind of stuck out to me. Talked about responsible leadership and responsible citizenship. And I think we can all agree like honesty falls under both of those two. And if you're manipulating your scores, adjusting your scores, you're not being honest. And that violates responsible leadership and responsible citizenship, in my opinion. So I don't think his behavior aligned with the university's mission.
I agree with that, but I also think that like he went against one of their missions. One of their missions were to make sure like the students understand like policies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It said understanding of public policy issues. So like I feel like if you're gonna be teaching people about public policy issues and then you're gonna go against a policy that
Right.
basically is global, like you don't do that. I feel like you're kind of just going against it in general, so you're not really following the mission.
Yeah, it's definitely contradictory. He doesn't really set a solid role for the students, especially that's not really being a good leader, like, and setting a good role, which is in their kind of their mission statement. Like, you would want the kids to be honest, hardworking, really work for those SAT scores instead of just inflating them. So that doesn't really look good on their part, and I guess technically works towards the goal of the school because they're getting them into better colleges, but it's just how they're doing it, not if they're doing it.
I mean, there's not too much more to add on to that because I agree with all of that. And that's pretty much what I was going to say. Like, I wrote a little paragraph thing, and that was pretty much exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, like I just have it on like Word and I have the screen split. But yeah, I was going to go off of what you said about like the leadership and responsive and being responsible and how it's breaking honesty. And that's one of the biggest things you can ask for. And it's hard for you to preach that that's what your policies are when you're doing something so dishonest, so morally wrong. Yeah, that's pretty much what I was gonna say.
It also can go back like a little further than just inflating the numbers. Like if this guy is the dean of admissions and he's like the last say of who gets in and who doesn't, how do you know he's not letting in people with different scores just based on this situation? Like he's already changing the numbers. What if he's making these people he's letting in look better than they are? Like that type of thing.
We have a lot more factors that we don't know about that are just kind of
But it's
going
just
under the
like it's like
surface.
that slippery slope type of thing where
Yeah, it brings everything into question.
yeah, like what else was going on that no one knows about? Because he is the dean, like he's the guy who is the final say, signing all these papers, letting these people in. So you never know.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything they want to say, or think they're good?
I think
I think
we
it was a good
covered.
conversation.
I think we covered everything. We went through the 4 questions, talked about the development, the dilemma.
Yeah, I definitely think saying things that aren't true and hiding or divulging information were two big roles in this. Also, manipulation and fraud, that type of stuff.
Be a lot.
Is everyone good? I can stop the recording.
I think so.
Yep.